Okay. Hello again for those that are interested. Um, last journal entry, I was kind of talking about the moeds, the seasons, and how that was so instrumental in getting me to think maybe I've missed something in the Bible. Um, I think the other thing that was really a, a light bulb that went on was what I would call patterns. Like when you're doing, when you're looking to repeat something or to continue it, you look for the pattern so you can keep going in the right way. And I feel like how I grew up, maybe that's not how others grew up, but how I grew up is that the pattern started in Matthew. Um, and so everything, how I looked at the Bible, all started from how it lined up with Matthew through Revelation. So everything that I set like concepts upon, I went to Matthew through Revelation. Um, how to walk my life out with God, how to walk my life in general, um, what the Bible had to say about a topic, that's where I started. And I feel like that was one of the big eye openers to me is that I realized that the pattern starts in Genesis. That's where it starts. And if I'm going to understand Matthew through Revelation better, and I'm going to understand the man of Jesus better, then starting there is not going to be the best place for me. It's starting in the beginning. Like Rich and I've had this conversation a couple times in this progress and saying, man, how often in our life when we would tell somebody that was like, well, where do I start reading in the Bible? And, we'd either say, start in the Gospels, or, I mean, the big one always is start in the book of John. And now I'm just feeling so strong that if we tell people and we tell people to start in the Gospels, we're starting at 2/3 into the story. And you think that might not make a difference, but the more that I'm reading, starting in Genesis, the more that is determining how I'm reading Matthew through Revelation. Um, so when somebody asks me questions about, well, did the disciples, I should say this, should Christians continue to do the feasts? Listen, I'm not an expert on all of this. This is just a journey. This isn't me doing a Ben Shapiro on anybody. It is my journey. And so all I can tell you is my experience. And what I would say to that is, should Christians do the feast? My answer would be, let's start in the beginning and let's look at what God said from the beginning. Now, Jesus came in and gave us a new covenant, and he made a way where there wasn't a way before, and we needed to have priests. So there's some things really that actually got a little bit harder, not easier, with Jesus. Like people that wanted to complain in the New Testament about, what does it mean? When he says, you say to look at, to have commit adultery is like you're having sex with somebody, but he's saying to look at a woman. So to look at a woman is committing adultery. So Jesus actually made all of God's regulations and instructions, took it to a higher level. But anyway, digressing there. I think the thing that has become so important to me is we start in Genesis, and particularly Genesis 1 and 2, because that was paradise. That was God's intention from the beginning. Like this is a part of my biblical journey, but this was kind of before I started looking at things like this. But like we look at the chapter 1 and 2 of Genesis, and we see the God idea of man and woman. Once we get out of Genesis 1 and 2, a lot of the stipulations about men and women are because of the fall. So in Genesis 1 and 2, we see man and woman, they walk together. They were both still in oneness. They were both still in Adam. Eve was still in Adam. Adam still had Eve in him when God gave them the instructions to name the animals, to subdue the earth, to multiply. That was not a man job. That was mankind job. So that was God's original intention. And there's a lot that I could say about women in Genesis 1 and 2 that has blown my mind by looking at it from God's perspective. But the things that God did specifically in those first 2 chapters of the Bible should be no-brainers to us, that's God's intention, that his intention before he even put a man on the earth was these seasons, these moeds that he put in the sky. Now, we might have to figure, so when we know that, then we have to look at what Paul and other of the apostles might have said, or we might have misunderstood them in saying in the New Testament. We can't look at the New Testament and say this is the basis of all truth. This is the foundation of all truth, and then look back to the Old Testament and make the Old Testament fit in the New Testament. The Old Testament was first, so everything in the New Testament to me now has to line up with what is in the Old Testament. So I know that probably sounds a little bit like, well, what are you saying then? You have to do all these things in order to be forgiven. And I'm not saying all that. All I'm saying is that if I'm having conflict in the New Testament about something that's in the Old Testament, I probably should go back to the Old Testament and look at it more clearly so that I can see possibly what was the New Testament trying to say. Because when we're looking, it's like we look at the whole Bible through a New Testament lens when we should be looking at the whole Bible from the Old Testament, or as Jesus called it, from the law and the prophets. I think they're starting to make more sense to me by doing that. This is just a new concept to me, and I'm just going to finish with this one that I don't have my brain all wrapped around, is the Last Supper. When you understand a little bit more about the heart of God in covenant, and everything about God's heart was to make a covenant with man. Started with Abraham and Noah, and then Moses, then David. It was always about a covenant. It was always about aligning, connecting in a intimacy way with his people. So when Jesus, on that last night, is taking the bread and the wine for a new covenant, I'm understanding now the importance of that moment more than ever, because he's saying now there's a new covenant, not a different covenant, not a completely different covenant, but an expanded covenant. Because every time when I'm seeing the covenants throughout the Old Testament into the New Testament, it was like God had this small thing with Abraham, then he added it. He had one with Noah, and then Abraham, and expanded, and then expanded and expanded to create more things. So what Jesus was doing with the bread and the wine was creating a covenant with us, was with his disciples. And that's what he wants us to do when we're having the bread and wine. Yes, it's remembering his death, but it's remembering his death because he bought a covenant. He didn't buy the covenant. He created covenantal terms with his death. And that's the point of the Last Supper, is the transaction of a new covenant. So that's it for this time. See you next time.